So a little bit over a year ago, I got my hands on this guitar right here. This is my D'Angelico Brighton. Now, this wasn't the first D'Angelico that I had ever played, but it was the first one that I had really put my hands on that wasn't necessarily a semi-hollow. Now, this guitar specifically is very different than a lot of the guitars that I was playing at the time. It kind of feels like they took a Les Paul, made it more modern with like the coil tap and the electronics without having the pressure of being someone like a Gibson and sticking to that vintage thing, which would piss people off. And they also gave it this neo-soul flair, which makes a lot of sense because most of the guys that I saw playing guitars like these D'Angelico solid bodies were Instagram cats who really thrive in that neo-soul world. And with me being a wannabe neo-soul guitarist wanting to follow in their footsteps, I found myself more and more using it on different videos, even a couple of jams, and just beginning to get a general understanding of what it was supposed to sound like and what these different knobs even do. And I think I realized that for the most part, it was far more akin to some of their non-solid bodies than I had originally anticipated. And in my mind, when it came to D'Angelico as a whole, outside of specific pickup choices, the biggest differences in my mind became way less about sound and more about like ergonomic differences. Nothing necessarily wrong with that. I mean, I was thinking of embracing it and going fully down that rabbit hole by making this entire video about their Atlantic guitar, which is literally the same exact thing as this guitar, just with a single cut and seeing how different guitars affect different people and whatnot. That was until, well, I figured out there might be another player in this equation. So I just opened up this thing for the first time yesterday, and right off the bat, I'll let you know, it's a little weird, but in like the best way possible. So this is the Jacko signature model, and I got it right before Thanksgiving when I was about to visit my parents. So it pretty much just sat outside my living room for the last week and a half up until last night when I decided, what the heck, let me open this thing up and see what it can actually do. And pretty immediately, I could tell that it was a very different experience from both of those different D'Angelicos that I had played before. The most obvious of which, of course, being the design as a whole. From D'Angelico, I'm not necessarily used to this unconventional asymmetric thing, so I thought to myself, oh, they must be doing that for the signature. This must be their newest design. I mean, I've seen it once or twice, but the more I started to look back and research, I figured out that this is called the Bedford design. It was actually the first solid body design that they ever did. Even though it looked a little bit different than this and has come from a couple different players, but that's when I realized, oh wait, I do know where I've seen this shape before. Now, I am by no means what anyone would call a deadhead. I mean, outside of Brown Eyed Woman and a couple other tracks that I'd heard covered by different artists, I've never really taken a listen to the band. But upon researching this guitar and looking back at some of those videos, I had remembered, oh wait, Bob Weir, both their rhythm guitarist and one of their founding members, well, he played one of these. And on the complete other end of the spectrum, a guy named Johnny Coe, who currently plays for the band Lawrence, I had also seen him play one of these. But those two people are on completely different ends of the spectrum when it comes to both genre and tone. So I had to figure out for myself, like, what is this thing even supposed to sound like? And that's where I went to the source, because at the end of the day, this is, well, a signature. Oh, that's funky. That's funky. So I've definitely seen him before on Instagram, just having had Neo Soul completely take over my algorithm over the last 5 years. But having more of a focused approach right now, the dude is an absolute monster. And I see more of what, from a few videos, his playing style is like. But I want to see what we can actually do with this. So right off the bat, it was pretty abundantly clear to me that I wasn't going to be able to do any of this stuff without years of vigorous practice. So I wanted to see how it would adjust to like my playing and my styles in particular. And once I started actually going at this thing, outside of it probably needed a little bit of a setup because it was just sitting there for a week and a half. But the neck felt pretty standard to what I was used to from basically every D'Angelico that I've ever played. If you can see it, it's got a very flat neck radius at 14 inches, which is something I've been getting more and more used to, even with some of my more Strat style guitars as of much more recently. And that wasn't necessarily a plus or a minus. I just started feeding into this idea again, okay, it must be the same as those other guitars, even if the body form is different, it might be chambered only on one side. But then we got to the pickups and I actually started recording through it. And that's when I was like, okay, this thing is actually, well, completely different from those other D'Angelicos. And quite frankly, that was evident pretty immediately because once I took the guitar out of the case, I was like, let me feel the air move through an actual amp. Something like my Gremlin, which is already bassier than some of like the Vox AC15 glassy clean tones that I've been getting more recently. And even with the tone turned up way higher than I usually have it, I could tell that these pickups, even in the neck position, was a lot bassier than I was expecting. And that's even keeping in mind the fact that I had a ribbon mic on an already pretty bassy amp, and I was like, oh, I can see why these pickups are meant for more of like the funk thing, which makes sense for the artist that they were made for. So essentially, here's what I'm talking about. I think that my general assumption was, simply because this has single coils rather than the general humbuckers that I'm used to having on like guitars that have the same headstock as this, that it was going to be like really, really bright, almost stratty. And it did have the stratty characteristics, but it had so much more bass than I'm used to out of different strats. And I guess that's where they got the funk thing. Even once I got to the in-between positions with the middle pickups, I started to notice just how different it was from everything that I was expecting. I think it was so pronounced with the bass when it came to the 5 and the 4 position. I was wondering what exactly they were going to do once I actually started playing out of this humbucker right here. So I started playing through it and it was completely different outside of just the recordings that I showed you earlier. Like I was saying before, when I was doing everything in the context of the mix, just plugging into the quad cortex, there was so much tone shaping to get it to sit right that I don't feel like I actually got to experience this pickup. But once I did, that's when I started to question things and I realized that this actually isn't a humbucker. I think that's the biggest thing and what made this so different from all of the other D'Angelicos that I was talking about before, is that it actually has the SSX configuration with no coil split at all. So at the end of the day, why does any of this matter? And I think it's to say that I really like it when I see guitar builders switch up the flow. Like in my head, because I've owned 2 of them before, I had an idea of what a D'Angelico felt like and what it was supposed to look like and what it's supposed to sound like. And for the most part, this still looks and feels neck-wise down exactly like both of those guitars. But once I got to the pickups, even whilst being well aware that this was the original solid body shape that they had, it was a completely different experience. And I feel like it was cool that they were able to go a little bit weird. It felt a little bit to me, outside of the looks and the feel of the neck, like some of the older Supro guitars, because I know that's technically the same company. And I feel like pretty much every part of the construction feeds into that, not just having different pickups, but taking out the coil split and making one of them the gold foil instead of all 3 single coils. I think it was just pretty cool. But at the end of the day, I don't think it matters what I think. I think it matters what you think. So please let me know. Have you played D'Angelico guitars before? What do you think of their solid bodies? What do you think of this signature altogether? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I was wondering when I was going to get a different one out, because if you can't tell, I'm a little bit sick, but we have some cool stuff to come. But if you want to know anything more about the D'Angelico, Giacomo Torra, the links are in the description. Make sure to check it out. It's one of the best ways to support the channel if that's something you want to do. Or if you're just curious about any of the other gear that I use in this video, make sure to check out those links. Also, thank you so much to all of my patrons. There's some exclusive extra stuff on there if you want to join the community. Like and subscribe if you had a good time. And most importantly, like most important of all, have a fantastic night and do not catch a cold.